Folks, welcome to another edition of Throwing Out Some Heavy Light. My name is Jamal Binding. I'm the chair of the board of Movement Omaha for Race Equity, which is an organization dealing with anti-racism, racial, challenging racial issues, and trying to challenge apartheid organizations to bring more people of color within their system. The other issue that we deal with is trying to get people to be more transparent and accountable to communities of color in our state and in our society. So we've been around for over 10 years. We have a board of directors that very much guide some of the policy issues that we've developed. And again, we're one of the last groups standing that is not afraid to back down and deal with the Trumpites and the white supremacists that exist in our communities, in our state, and so on. In this segment of our program, we have Tim Clark, who's the chairman of the Commission on African American Affairs, which was created by Nebraska state statutes of laws to help promote the interests and public policy of African Americans in the state. The commission has existed for a few years, I think a couple of years, and the state auditor recently issued a scathing report that illustrates problems in past management. Tim came on after that somewhat. We invited Tim to respond to questions and hear feedback from African Americans who are poorly represented in many government and nonprofit leadership positions. This commission is based out of Lincoln and recently met in Omaha for a few times. I do know they had a challenge the first year or so, even coming to Omaha. Again, even though the highest percentage of African Americans in the state live in Omaha. But again, they have corrected that by meeting here from time to time. I hope they develop better relations with African Americans throughout the state. So briefly, I'm gonna start off, Tim. But did you share a little bit? Why are you the chair of the commission? A little bit more background, a little bit about how this came about.
Hey, thank you. First of all, thank you for an opportunity to share. It came about, my chairmanship came about in terms of just my fellow commissioners. That was a vote. And so they voted me in to be the chair to represent them. I've been on the commission for probably less than a year. And Ajamal, the commission has been going on for about 4.5 years.
Oh,
So it's been
wow.
more than 2 years. So
Wow.
we've been at this for a while. And so through elections, I became the chair of this commission. That's
Okay.
how this came about in terms of my chairmanship.
Good. Now, as a lifelong Nebraska, I recalled years ago that Senator Henry Chambers was against the creation of this African American Commission. And this was over 30 years ago. I know Dr. Donald Pope was instrumental in that struggle, and somewhere along the line, one of the white senators, I understand, who was introduced in the legislature, dropped it because Senator Chambers predicted it was not be effective and he would not support it back then. Based on your strategic plans and goals, is the squeeze worth the juice today, where you're at today?
You know, I would say yes. I mean, just like any startup business, Jamal, you go through a period, and I believe we have gone through a storming period in the last 4 years. And you mentioned at the offset the audit report. We're under an audit right now, and I believe we're going to come out of that audit, and it's going to make us better. But is the juice, whatever you said,
It's a
the
squeeze versus
squeeze
juice.
versus the juice? I'm gonna say absolutely. Anytime you can wake up and have a organized force in a positive light, to look and shine the light on things that will help African Americans in the state of Nebraska, yes, it is worth it.
Okay. Now, after reading the state auditor's report, what recommendations are being implemented or to help improve the commission's effectiveness? Because he had some scathing points and some other things that I thought were somewhat negative and also somewhat alarming. So, what are some things that are coming out of that
Yeah.
from your vantage point?
Well, currently, Jamal, we're currently still under an audit. That audit probably will not, as we're anticipating the conclusion of that, the end of this month. We're having dialogue with the auditing office, and I'm going to just tell you the things that they're finding is just some fundamental, basic organizational, structural kind of things. And so we're identifying them. We're not going to run from it. We're going to take an own. We're going to be responsible for what's there, but we're committed to putting the systems in place. That audit speaks to mostly a lack of accountability and sign offs on things, mainly around money. And so, since during this audit, we have implemented what are we doing? Your question, what are we doing about it? We now have in place a financial policy. What are we doing about it? We now have in place bylaws. What are we doing about it? We also will be passing a code of conduct and conflict resolution. Those are the kind of just some system, basic fundamental things, structural things that we will put in place. We're not running from Jamal accountability, period.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Now, also, it's notable in some public policy education and comments on your webpage newsletter, it rarely mentions racial issues of African Americans. Is the commission finding it challenging to navigate racial conversations because of Trumpism or the pushback from white folks who want to whitewash African American history or contributions to this state or to this country? And I found that strange when I looked at it.
Yeah, I think probably you didn't see it at all because it's integrated in everything we do. When you think about our five pillars that we're going to focus on, Jamal, economics, education, housing, crime, and health, with an emphasis on legislative awareness, education, and looking at those kind of things policy wise. So, you know, the fact that it's not on there doesn't mean that we're sensitive or we're running away from it. I would probably speak, for the commissioners with knowing the ones that's on there. And believe me, some of the individuals that's on there that they're not running from too much of anything. Okay. And so because you don't see it, don't mean that we are not going to put emphasis on that and that this Trumpism in terms of just what's happening nationally, believe me, is not um, creating a sense of fear for us to stay away from that. We will tackle those issues around race, racism, all those things as we see fit.
No, the reason I ran with that is because there are some organizations that want to do race equity work, but they won't mention racism or they won't challenge the concept of white supremacy. And again, one of the issues I shared when I was teaching a class years ago at Metro Community College, they had a whole chapter on race and they never used the word racism. Like you find that, I find that strange. Or when I was working at Douglas County, they pulled me in and said I couldn't use the word racism and white fragility. I'm like, are you serious? You people who have the intelligence of an amoeba or whatever, you can't get away from talking about racism for African Americans and other people of color in this country. And so at some point, I had to push back the neophytes and people who wanted to kind of put a muzzle, as they've done on some people's mouth in this community. So again, unless it's mentioned or written, we can slide away from do some of this white fragility stuff and get scared and just not even talk about the great disparities of the history of what's happening in the United States, particularly what's coming out of the White House and so on. But again, at some point, I would argue we almost have to name it and claim it and make sure that people are front and center about it if we're going to do the kind of
I
work in
agree.
that area.
I agree, and I think what we're going to experience in terms of years to come, that we were dead wrong from running from what you just said, and in some way just dismissing the facts that we have to deal with racism, dismissing in terms of diversity and inclusion, all those kind of things. I think it's just dead wrong. And that's something as an individual that I'm not going to dismiss.
Right.
I think it enrich in terms of any environment to pay attention to DEI. Why are we so afraid? Look what's happening. I commend Harvard University for standing up. And we need more, and as our history will write, who stood up amongst the people just to say you're dead wrong.
Right. Now, in the other thing I want to say is, as someone who was born in Hastings, Nebraska, I wonder how African Americans outside of Lincoln or Omaha can play a role in public policy with the African American Commission, particularly in state government? I know that your aim is not just Omaha and Lincoln, but what about
Right.
blacks who live in Grand Island, Kearney, Scotts Bluffs, and so on and so on? What kind of statewide agendas will you guys be addressing? Again, dealing with African Americans.
Yeah, and thank you. And that we will be very intentional about reaching out to the whole state, Western, all parts of Nebraska, and really try to understand um, concerns, issues, opportunities for Black people throughout this state. It's a commission for the state of Nebraska, African American Affairs. So we've already started our staff. We will look at parts of this city. We will program specifically to hear those voices outside of Lincoln, Nebraska, and Omaha. There's more. Like you, who would have thought? Aljamal from Hastings, Nebraska? I mean, Black people lived in Hastings?
Well, I like to
I
tell
mean,
people that's part of the center of the universe when I came into the wormhole here, but also some people don't know there were African Americans went there because of the ammunition dump back in World War II. And so there's a lot of black folks who went there, came from South and elsewhere to do very dangerous
that's
work. And
right.
also, there's other parts of this community or state where African Americans are there and they sometimes migrate. But again, we're not all from Omaha. But at the end of the day, one
That's
of
right.
the things is how do we make this state a better place for all of us? And most people don't know it.
That's right.
Nebraska is 20% people of color, but you never know that
Yeah.
looking at state government, local government, city government, and so on. I'm gonna switch up a little bit and ask you a different kind of question, but it's related.
Okay.
What are your cite? If you had to cite three accomplishments since your tenure, I know you have been there for a short time. What attributes deserve, we would say, honorable mention?
Yeah. Okay. First of all, when they go low, I go high. Okay, Michelle Obama. But I look at it. I look at things in terms of just not so much. I look back to learn, and when you talk about tenure, it's about really what's in front of us to make better,
Right.
right? And so I don't look in terms of our 4 years. You was thinking 2 years. It's been 4+ years, and what I said is we were in the storming building phase. We're coming out of that. That's an accomplishment because we still, Aljamal could be stuck in destruction and confusion and creating disruption. We made it out that. I tell you, we had a public meeting in Lincoln, and it was a beautiful thing. People had at odds in terms of opinions about things. We passed one of our policies and pieces, and everybody kind of like wanted to hug each other. So, what accomplishment is we're moving forward? We have identified specifically. We've identified and hired a company to take us through our strategic plan.
Okay.
No organization or commission without a plan. Come on now. You got to write it down in terms of just where you're at and where you want to go. We've passed and starting that process of building infrastructure for policies. And like I stated before, accomplishment. And I count this as accomplishment because in 4.5
So
years,
strategic plan is one. What's number two?
number two, infrastructure in terms of putting in place policies. One of the things the
Okay.
audit is looking at, Ajmal, is you don't have, I see, I'm just going to quote unquote, we see a lot of practice and drafts of policies. I don't see anything that's been, some's been eradicated, but so we just accomplished it. We signed our policy in terms of financial policy. We signed, we voted and a majority have voted, and it was passed. Our bylaws. It may sound to you and other folks as just damn, that's all,
So
but
you got,
you
you got
can't
two. You
begin.
got bylaws, policy, and then of course, street plan. Your third.
The third one is this. Third one is this: is that we, as a commission, are beginning to gel and create some common ground in terms of how we move forward. In the past, a lot of that just didn't happen. We couldn't create that consensus. So I just think building the right kind of relationships, Jamal, to help move us forward.
So, in other words, if
I
I translate that, social capital amongst board members to communicate in an effective way with each other instead of some of the stuff we read in the paper about the past conflicts and the infighting.
that right there, that right there, and that is a conflict because you can't get no movement if you can't have no harmony. And I know it sounds like a song. I am a musician, I'm an artist, but I mean it. You have to have some degree of harmony. So I say that's where we're at, and I'm excited about our future and where we're going to go.
Okay. There's a conversation in our community about we got to do more community forums. I looked at the past city council debate in District 2 and elsewhere, and it was almost comical. It was a freak show in terms of how they talked to each other and degraded, and just some of them didn't have a sense of what public policy was and that and so on. Again, not to go into that, but the question is, are we going to be more community forums, chats, and opportunities to build social capital? I know that, as I said earlier, it was hard for the previous commissions to come to Omaha because they wanted to hang out in Lincoln and be next to the big house, I guess, or whatever. But in your tenure and so on, can that happen under the current regime to build social capital with communities of African Americans in the state? Where you meet
Yeah,
more than just Omaha and Lincoln or whatever, but you meet with community forums or meetings like that. Help me understand that from your vantage point.
yeah, and so I will. And so part of Senator Ashley's bill that's currently made it out of committee is on the floor. It's going to really identify in there and make statute for us to at least do a minimum of 4 meetings in Omaha. Those are
Oh,
general
okay.
meetings, and we will have special meetings really as we stand up the work in those 5 pillars that I talked about earlier. But specifically to your question, we are seeking and looking at standing up an community advisory committee because we feel that if this is going to be a true commission by the people, for the people, that we have to get out there and do more focus community town halls and those kind of things, not just in Omaha and Lincoln, Grand Island, Western Nebraska, and we'll do that hybrids if we need to. But we're seeking to get out and make sure. And then one of the things, to your point, we're also looking at implementing a state of the union for African Americans in Nebraska. So we create a baseline. This is where you and other folks in the community can help. We need data that will give our elected officials and thought leaders and influencers, do we really know the state of African Americans in Nebraska? Let's don't guess about that. Let's get a really good understanding in one package, one delivery system, and say, here is the state of African Americans.
You know, it brings to mind years ago, the Department of Labor would not collect data on unemployment in African Americans for years. And so you had all these neophytes and pundits and so-called gadflies running around talking about the unemployment level was this or that. And they had no empirical data from the state because the state refused to collect it. It reminds me of years ago under I think, Chief Tom Warren's watch, where they didn't submit data to the National FBI about something because they were mad or something like that. Again, I call them out because as public officials, when you're required to give data on race or whatever, you should jump at it and do it to show how you're getting bad, good, or whatever. But at the end of the day, you'd be surprised at the number of folks who don't have data to drive their work, and you wonder why some of us walk in circles and look like we, again, don't know where we're going and so on. But that's very important to be able to do that data. We only got
Yeah,
about 10 minutes left, and I want to get to a couple questions before we open it up. Uh, there is a linkage between the Nebraska Urban League, the NWSP, the commission, and so on. My question is there a link between these so-called are these organizations deal with African American issues? In other words, the commission, what's your relationship with the STAR, with all these black organizations in terms of what you're doing today? Urban League
yeah,
comes to mind, NWC, the first one to jump out at me. And
yeah, absolutely. And so, Urban League, NAACP, Dr. Wayne Brown with Urban League, and Reverend T. Michael Williams. Those are the two leading organizations, and of course the Empowerment Network. So we're looking at, and we in terms of this legislative session, Jamal, we've worked with the Urban League, NAACP, and with Empowerment Network, helping, because part of legislative work, before things get out of committee, you have to figure out a strategy of how to get things out of committee, or to kill things that you don't want out of committee. That takes work. And we have staff that's dedicated to helping that with volunteers. So to your question, can we improve and do better? Yes, we can, and we will. We cannot do this work by ourselves. It's going to take a collective effort and coalition to do some of the heavy lifting that we know, African American, Black folks, that we must do if we're going to look at Nebraska in a way that we're going to help make things better. And so, case in point, the winner take all, that did not succeed in getting passed. We did outreach, and we can't call it lobbying, but we did the kind of things that shine a light on that and educate people about issues. And so Empowerment Network, they had people to come down and testify, and other community people. So yes.
And again, that brings another point. I've been on boards of ACLU and so on, and sometimes we have to be very careful that we take credit for things that we didn't do or we only had a part to do, because I've seen organizations, things would pass by the efforts of Senator Chambers or other people, and we may go and talk to one senator one day and then we'll say, oh, we succeeded in doing, well, collectively we're a group, but we have to be very careful how much time did we put in it. And again, I like writing letters. I don't go to testify a lot because, again, most of the individuals is like talking to the wall, but that's another story. The other question I have related to this one is, there are advocacy organizations that deal with public policy. I'm thinking of Nebraska Appleseed. I'm thinking of Voices for Children, the ACLU. Do you have any relationships with those individuals? Because they're known for doing public policy work on issues related to poverty, children, and social justice issues. So is the commission have any relationship with any of those Lincoln-based organizations, or even the one in Omaha, Voices for Children?
Yeah. And to answer that question, I'm not sure in terms of just the depth of relationships in terms of organization, but you're making a good point in terms of just, we're not, and the current administration and the commissioners, we know and understand that we can't just do this by ourselves. So we will be looking at forging those kind of relationships on Jamal, supporting entities that's already out there doing the work.
Gotcha. Appreciate it. Real public policy deal with African Americans of the civil rights struggle is not taught at the university. I will say that up front. In actual fact, I actually taught a course on public policy at UNO, and it was a challenge to teach to these graduate students. But if you look at our law schools and the public schools, we don't talk public policy as we talk about changing laws and so on. How would you best describe public policy as it relates to African Americans in Nebraska? In other words, you have to help us define public policy from your perspective, Tim, or from African American Commission. How would you define it for some of us who are naive and don't know what public policy means?
So, so public policy from our perspective is we vote and send people to Nebraska to our legislate our to the legislation, senators, and what they're there for is really to work with the citizens and organizations to form policies, policies that become law, and to write a bill that's going to be a policy, public policy. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of buy-in, and so when the session is over in June, the work already began in terms of just people lobbying, people positioning, and people coming to these centers and say, we need a public policy around police officers stopping and searching cars. I'm just as an example, stopping, searching cars without any evidence that there's something in the car, right? What does that mean in terms of policy? And so it goes through first draft, second draft of people and senators saying, I can live with that. I can't live with that. And building consensus. A lot of laws get passed because you have relationships and you build consensus. There's a little give, there's a little take. So I think to your question, what is public policy? At the end of the day, there's a lot of public policies that don't make it to law.
Right.
They just don't make it there because they don't have the votes, not have the relationships, and probably didn't buy enough votes. At the end of the day, we're look like this country has turned into a public policy of who's got the most money, and so there's a lot of money that goes into our Jamal shaping public policy. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of what we have to do a better job of educating people about that game of public policy. What is it and how can you affect it?
As a native of Nebraska, one of the things I think we're too unicameral centric, and one of the things we don't often talk about is the city council and the county commissioners and the county attorney, as well as the public pretender. There are things that happen on the local level that are also public policy. And so sometimes the things that are going on with the apartheid government in Omaha and Douglas County, meaning there are very few African Americans working there and people of color. If you look at it, it's an old boy system. Public policy also deals with ordinance. It also deals with even
Right,
administrative management of how they get direction. So if a state senator or unicameral pass a law, sometimes the interpretation is left up to neophytes or people in county government who probably can't even read a book, some of them, or some of those people act like they own the buildings or own the public and they don't communicate in our community. And one example I look is some of the city planning departments. It's rarely you see them in the hood, but again, public policy is not just state; it could be federal, obviously, on the national level. And sometimes we develop this myopic mentality of this jaundiced perspective that we only go in one area. When you look at a lot of the stuff that affects us, I would love to have them give property tax bill back to a lot of people in Douglas County and the city who don't have kids in the school system or who don't have skin in the game of getting jobs as a counter on the road. But those are issues we can talk about public policy. So it's a whole gamut. And again, I think as Nebraska, we sometimes think Lincoln is the end all. In actual fact, sometimes
that's
the
right.
damage is done right at the city council level, as we've seen in this city with funding for our community. We're getting down to the last minute, so but I want to give you a chance for moving it open. Do you have any comments you want to share before we open up to the participants? Raise questions directly to you, Tim.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for this opportunity. And just quickly, this work in terms of the commission, this is the People's Commission. And I really feel that our success will largely lie in our ability to reach out and understand in terms of what's important to the people. We've gotten away from this trickery that we elect people, and of course, I got here because I was elected, appointed by the governor, right? But this is we're supposed to be driven in terms of a government for the people and by the people. This is the People's Commission, and the statute governs in terms of just the work. That's the policy that you're talking about. It cites in terms of our areas of concentration, what we need to deliver. And so outside of that, it's how do we build a team to deliver the statute and manifest that statute and get it done. So I just, I'm not asking for patience because we've been around for four and a half years. I'm asking for that if you have input, we would like to hear that. But I ask you to really read the statute so you can understand. Most folks, sometimes they come at you and they just don't take the time to read and understand why you are even here what your existence is all about, please take the time to understand and read why the statue exists. And so that's all I have, Jamal, and thank you for this opportunity. But I'm excited about the work that's in front of us, the focus on these 5 areas of concentration with an emphasis on legislative issues, opportunities that will affect Black people here in a positive way or negative way in Nebraska.
Good.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. We're right at that 7:30 mark. And as I promised, folks, I'm going to open it up to folks. If you'd like to ask him a question or make a comment, this is the time to do so. I can't hear you.
Know me.
There's 9 people here. A lot of folks are watching on Facebook. They're kind of like scared to come on the show and do stuff in public because they don't want to deal with the heat.
No. Hey, Jamal, they're not afraid.
Well, you don't think so? I'm like, okay, help me out here, y'all. I'm gonna lean back and play the role of keep my mouth shut. Okay.
Everybody has
I have
their
a question.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a question.
Cheryl?
What is the name of the consulting company that you hired to assist you with the strategic plan, and where did they come from?
And the company is based out of Lincoln called Robnick. And they're based out of Lincoln, and it's a local company. And so
what is the makeup? What's the demographics of the company?
Of that company, I'm not. It's the company is white owned. I'm not sure if how many minorities they have in their company that's going to be working on this, but I can find out because that's this initiative was led by our chairman of our strategic plan is Joanne LaFleur Ariki, the executive director of Malcolm X Foundation.
So my question, and I don't mean to interrupt you, Tim, but I know that other people might want to ask the question, and I don't want to take up all the time, is here you could not find a Nebraska Black consulting company. It's very disheartening when this is the purpose of the commission, is to assist and help Nebraskan Black or African Americans, whichever way you want to say it, because I looked at it as being like, I thought you were looking to change and to make things better. And I find it disheartening for a strategic plan to have to be done by a firm out of Lincoln, and doesn't have much diversity. I just find that disheartening. So, I mean, if you want to comment to any of that, that's fine. But that was all my question was. So I'll let somebody else get in.
Yeah, and I appreciate your feedback there. And we did have a Black company that was part of that RSP process. And, when it came down to just, picking, there was we put together a matrix and a rubric that scored everyone, and be quite honest, a lot of it was experience and cost, and the Black firm was going to cost us 50% more than the firm that we chose to do that.
By the way,
that was a little bit of insight there.
Tim, we got like 4 questions that jumped out from Facebook and so the chat and so on. I want to do it, but let me run through them real quick if you can run through them. Someone asked, what do you want to see come into fruition? What area do we need to focus on as African Americans in the commission? And if you can answer that real brief, because there's 3 other questions I'm going to get to, and then I'm going to throw it back out.
Yeah, I think probably if I had it my way, 2 things. Economics. We have to master the economics of our people and this country. And the second thing is health. There's no wealth without health. And I think we all know. So economics and health.
Good. Anthony Wright raised his hand. Anthony, do you want to speak directly to Tim? And maybe if we can also keep, because we got 4 other questions I want to draw out. Anthony, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry. I'm out of the country and was having some problems getting on other than Facebook. And thank you, Ajamal, as always, for these incredible discussions. I guess my question is kind of building off of Miss Cheryl's of is like kind of what is the process for determining what are priority pieces of legislation? And the example I'll give is that I saw the commission like a lot of hoopla about this so-called blue dot, but nothing said about LB 266, which was signed into law, and now no municipality in the state of Nebraska can institute a rent control or rent stabilization ordinance. And so I guess I'm trying to figure out like how do we change that? Because me personally, I don't care about the blue dot, Tim. The blue dot does nothing to improve the material conditions of Black people in the state of Nebraska, right? It's a symbolic thing, but now Black people cannot even where we talk about affordable housing all the time, we can't do rent control now. So what is that process? Because I know that I sent in like along with Miss Cheryl, like probably like what was it, Miss C, like 10 or 11 bills. We didn't hear back. So I'd like to improve that process because I think we have missed some opportunities to bring things to people's attention. A lot of our folks don't know that there is no mechanism now for rent control statewide. But we're celebrating a blue dot that does nothing except allow some people to cash checks, but not all Black people.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's a very good question. And so there is a legislative committee in which they've added some community folks to that committee. It's led by um, Attorney Terry Crawford, and she's new to the commission. So, to your point, streamlining the process and trying to figure out what should the priorities be, because there's a whole lot of stuff in Lincoln, a whole lot. And so if you look on our website, you'll be able to see some of the bills that we just supported. But there are some bills that we not only supported, but we showed up for the hearings. And I think as we're getting better at this, it's going to take really the community and some alignment with the community helping us figure out and decide what the priorities should be. And so, I have to admit, we were kind of chasing ourselves this legislative session. We're learning and we're going to get better at it. We have a roundtable with three of the African American senators coming up the end of this month, Roundtree, Spivey, and McKinney, to talk to them about priorities and really the things that we need to be paying attention to. And so, to your point, we're not there. We can get better at it. And we do want community input. And I believe Commissioner Crawford has put two community people, I think Camera, and I believe another gentleman from the community is on her committee as well. But I'm pretty sure if other folks have interest and input, that you would entertain that as well.
By the way, I raised a couple of points of counter one of your staff members when I saw your list, and that was a question: how do you determine what's a priority? And secondly, if you have neophytes who've never written letters or gotten involved in advocacy, how would they know what is the Rubik cube or what we need to do? So there's got to be a little bit more opportunity for us to figure out what can have the most economic issues at, which moves me to another question, Tim. Someone has a point here and says one of the pillars deal with this whole issue of the inland port authority and all the chamber and all that stuff, urban core. Where are you guys on that whole issue? Because I know Senator McKinney and his other associates have been working on that. But is there something the African American Committee could work on, commission work on that one? Someone raised it as a question, kind of.
Okay, I think the area and in terms of Inland Port Authority, of course, we know Senator McKinney is leading that. This falls under our economic arm, and I've had meetings with Senator McKinney in terms of just really trying to stay in tune what's happening with that. And I do feel that we will be able to weigh in or put some emphasis in terms of just Inland Port Authority. You're talking about some real money that hasn't come our way before, that's going to really help stand up a business park and help support small businesses. So to that question, it's just more learning information. They just recently got allocated some of the money, so it's been a very slow process. So we're just watching, learning, and really readying ourselves to really see what we have to do to help support that process, because that can end up being a significant economic engine for North Omaha if it's done right.
Right. There's another question from Paul Fowlman on Facebook. He says, "What is your conversation about reparation on the table?" I do know there's some kind of myopic reparation conversation going on in Omaha, but I don't hear anything from them or anything about reparations. But is that a conversation here in Nebraska? Because I know in other states they're talking about reparations for African Americans, and again, all the money we waste in the war and different wars and all the stuff that's going on. Is that a viable conversation to talk about reparations, particularly for 450 years of enslavement and torture and things that we experience as African Americans?
I think, to my knowledge, in my short period of time of being around the African American affairs, I haven't. That issue has not been brought to light.
Bubble up.
Okay, and
Other
so, but
feedback.
but I'm not. But we're not afraid of it. There again, somebody needs to offer up, or we work together to create some policies or legislation around that, so we can at least have a meaningful discussion.
Right, more so. The other thing that just hit me is that we were talking about statewide. When I was in Grand Island doing some table talk years ago, there's a high percentage of Sudanese, African Somalis come up throughout the state who live in small towns. And so at some point, as we deal with the concept of African American commissions, we cannot ignore the many Africans who come from the continent to live in our state. And so we need to address that issue. But that's another caveat that we need to move to if we have people on our committee or commission who has the wherewithal to deal with that. That's an issue. Other feedback, other questions, other react.
Jamal, I have a comment and a question.
Go ahead, Donna.
This is Donna. Tim, a couple of things. When I hear people talk about economic development and I go west on Ames, I wonder where is the economic development potential that they seem to be talking about. So with that, I thought, one of the best individuals, a person who has a long list of accomplishments, is right up the road. He's a former graduate of North High and the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, and of course, Harvard University Law School. His name is Lance Morgan. It might be worth your while or somebody from the commission to drive up to Winnebago to see how they have developed that community. Because when I hear people talk about development, but they think it's okay to spend $40 million developing a football field at Carter Lake, I just don't get it. And the other thing that I would suggest is that maybe there be some town hall type events to get from the community what it is that they would like to see the commission do. And the reason I say that is because back in the 70s, when I was trying to convince Senator Chambers that there should be an African American commission, his issue was, what would it accomplish? And I just think the easiest thing to do is to say, this is what the community wants, not people who say that they represent the community. But if you can point to a meeting in Hastings or North Platte or Scottsbluff or some of the other small communities, yet they have African Americans living there, perhaps you could then document that this is what people are saying that they want. If that makes any sense at all. I feel like I'm maybe not making a lot of sense in saying
No,
what I
no,
said.
no. I think, I think you're point on, because sometimes, when you think about this commission and Ernie's point, what will it accomplish? But to your point, just that you just made, what if we accomplish just the fact that this is what the people want? That we build a consensus in terms of a direction because the commission is not like we're loaded with money that we can fund programs and things like that, but we should be able to shine the light on just that. Go through a process, Scotts Bluffs, Hastings, Grand Island, and Lincoln, Omaha. Here's what they want. So I think your point on.
Other feedback, other reactions, other comments. This is your part of the show. We got about 15 more minutes here. I'll throw out another question. Why don't you guys develop some kind of a podcast or some kind of a media apparatus to let us know what's going on? Because again, I know both of your previous director and the current guy who's working there, there's another woman I understand at PhD. They're Lincolnites, or they live, in a bubble. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but they don't have a history with us as African Americans in Nebraska or in Omaha or elsewhere. So how can we better communicate through this kind of apparatuses like this for the commission itself?
Yeah.
When you have such a powerful or potential powerful role.
Yeah. I think that right there, using these type of platforms. And so I think
What you waving to the mailman or something? What's you out there waving? Was a bird flying? Anyway, go ahead.
I'm working, man. They got me working, boy. It's hard out here, okay?
Next time, don't do it in the car.
Keep
You
it.
start waving to the policeman. They'll give you a ticket. Go ahead.
Yeah, I cut short my dinner for you, Jamal. Come on now, only certain
Show me some
people.
love, as we say. Come on, Oswald. Show me some love.
Right, come on now. I need a hug, okay? I need a hug. As my man Raheem Sanders would say, I need a hug. But I agree. And that's to your point, we've in the office we're talking about standing up a podcast, because we should more often communicate to the people and have vehicles like this, but also to play off. And I would love to be invited back or have some of our other commissioners come on your show. And maybe we
Can
just
they handle the
just
heat and the
feed you.
light?
We
That's my
feed you,
point.
Jamal. We feed you. I mean, I don't mind putting you in my budget. Wait a minute, did I say that publicly? Is this being recorded? Okay.
I don't want to reward. Like I said, I don't want to award, as Miss Charlotte said. I want to reward. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, everybody else is buying everything. Let me buy your show. Okay. I know I'm not Elon Musk, but we got a little money we can put towards some advertising.
Okay, keep going. Other feedback, other questions. Go ahead. A little humor is necessary for a show like
Could
that.
I ask another question?
Yes, Cheryl, go for it.
At your last meeting, it was put on the agenda that you would be talking about grants program or
Yeah.
something you were going to. So could you expound on that? And then second, you mentioned that you're halfway through the audit, and I'm not quite understanding on that. I thought that all of your payments, anything that was issued, was paid by the state. So how would there be a problem of auditing your financial records? Because I assume that's what you meant by an audit. Could you hit
Yeah.
those two?
Yeah. Hello?
Yeah, we hear you.
I'm
Go
here.
ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. So that's very, very good observation and questions there. Let me go to the audit first, Cheryl. And so you're right. Everything we pay goes through a state system. So every dime we spend is public, right?
Correct.
The audit is more in terms of just who authorized the spend. Was it properly authorized for that expenditure? That's the majority of it. Who did what? Who had the right to do it? And all those kind of things. That's kind of what I'm seeing in my conversation with Mike Foley, is more in terms of just, did they have proper sign-offs? And in some cases, when I'm seeing, in some cases, not all, in some cases they didn't. And like I told him and the commissioners, we're not running from there. I mean, like I was saying in the beginning, I said 4.5 years of kind of storming and and really working out things. I mean, they've been through 4 different directors. We're in the mid. We're transitioning, and our director Simone, she transitioned out and left for a greener pasture and got a great opportunity that she could not refuse. But there again, we're in transition, but we're going to be smart about it. We're going to at least have majority, if not all, of our strategic plan complete. So we have, part of organizational growth. It is hard for a leader to come in and the organization just don't know where they've been and where they're going. It is difficult for any ED. And I just think we shouldn't do that to our next ED.
Could you expound on the grant program?
And the grant program is this. Because of all of this uncertainty and transitional kind of things over the years, in the state government, if you don't spend it, you lose it, right? Because we were in transition of executive director, at some point, the office was out of their car. It was just it had some very humble beginnings. So what happened, Cheryl, is Commissioner Edmond, with her relationship with the finance, with the accounting office, we were able to get them to carry over the money that we didn't spend. That's why people they talk about, hey, what did they do with 2.4 million? Half of it, almost half of it is still in the bank.
So in other words, Tim, you haven't spent the money because you guys can't figure out how to spend it?
We got half $500,000 in the bank. Okay. So people, they talk and just don't have the facts. But to your point, Cheryl, what I mentioned is we have about, and when you put that you got money to spend out there, that's kind of dangerous sometimes. So I'm somewhat hesitant, but there is dollars that we have that carried over that we must allocate and spend before June 30th of this year. So one of the things that came up and that I offered up, that we maybe perhaps stand up a grant RFP to support community organizations that is aligned with our mission, purpose, and our goals. That's what that came from. And I'm appointing an ad hoc committee throughout, well, not really an ad hoc committee, but through our finance committee. Commissioner Nesbitt is going to take on what that looks like in terms of just offering up some of these dollars to the community. Did that answer your question?
Well, when are we going to know about the grant and what we can do, since this has to be allocated by June 30th? It would seem like, and we're halfway through April, when are we going to know? So if we're in an organization that could fit into the criteria of whatever the grant is, so that, I just don't like to see the same old company or organizations continue to get this when you're supposed to be trying to spread it around to make it go farther and work farther, more of the community.
Can I add to that, Ms. Cheryl, real quick?
I agree. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I have to agree with Ms. Cheryl, and I would add to that. I think it would go a long way to have a stipulation that any organization or formation that has received money from the Economic Recovery Act should not be receiving money from this grant pool. Unfortunately, if we are not nuanced and strategic and intentional about bringing money into our community, it could create more fissures than fission. And we saw that with the ARPA process. We just got to be honest. The same people who've been getting money for years and years and years got money. So let's Yeah, if you're, I'm gonna say it, if you're the Empowerment Network, why would they need any of the money from this commission when they just got $10 million? Or the Economic Development Corporation? Like, I have to agree with Miss Cheryl. We got to have some new ideas and some new people getting the largesse of the people's money.
Yeah. Now, I agree with spread it. And I think part of what I'm going to charge that committee to do is come up with a criteria and a process. And I think, maybe part of the scoring system, to you guys' point, is, that you get less points if you've already received ARPA funds or blah, blah, blah. I think there's ways that we can make sure we spread, but we got to also look at too, that we got to look at Lincoln. We got to look at some of these other places that we've all been talking about. But uh, um, I'm in agreement that we put together a process that make it reach and go farther, and especially put some emphasis on organizations that have not been funded, but they're doing the work. They're doing the work, but they're doing the work.
We're down to the last 4 minutes, 3 minutes. So we'll just give you maybe a minute. So any closing comment, Tim, and then I'll close off from here. But we're at the very
Yeah,
end here. So anything you want to say before we close out?
yeah. I just wanted to say that these commissioners, they're taking on this. This is volunteer, and I've been into some public meetings where, and that's part of it. Sometimes you got to take a beat. People, the community, they're upset because they feel nothing has happened, and since the 4 years of being a commission. And I hate to ask you to be patient. What I'm not going to ask you to be patient. I'm going to ask you to participate. And just like the comments, we're going to have opportunities for all those different areas of concentration for the community to participate in these committees. And so I thank you for this opportunity. Thank you more and Jamal, in terms of just your leadership. And I really appreciate one thing about you, Jamal, that I don't know if it because you're from Hastings or wherever, but you're not afraid to speak the truth, and mainly speak the truth of power. And so please continue to do that towards me, because steel sharpens steel. Eagles fly with eagles. And I know we're doing some initiatives together, but bring it on. But I think it's how we bring it. We don't have to be so disruptive and disrespectful in terms of how we bring it, because this is volunteerism. And when you look at a list, and I'll quote, of people, the audit department send the whole list of every single body that signed on to be a commission from day one. It is so sad to see that list and how many people resign because of all of this craziness. If there's any time for us to turn inward and figure out how do we get along so we can get better, this is the time. We don't have to agree with each other. We don't even like each other, but we got to have common interests and common goals that we decide we're going to roll up our sleeves and stand up and get done. So with that, if I had a microphone, Jamal, I would drop it right now. Okay. And so thank you so much, man, for doing this.
Well, Tim, I'd like to thank you for being here today. I know it's been difficult to get you and other commission members to articulate some of these issues in the past, and so this is a great opportunity to move forward. The second thing is that, and I appreciate the compliments, but I must say I have to attribute that to genetics. As you know, my mother was involved, and so we get
Okay.
choice of the way we have to speak truth to power and challenge system. And again, I
That's
like to
right.
brag that I was on probation 3 times Catholic charities in one time or two times at Promise Ship, but and then city working county commission, I stayed with them in their stuff because again they haven't done righteous stuff by our community. But again, at some point someone has to speak truth to power, and even more so now. We need brave
Yeah.
men and women and children to push back because at the end of the day we come from a history of African Americans who fought against a lot of atrocities and things, and sometimes we develop Negro amnesia and we must reverse this brainwashing education. We're down to the last minute. I want to say again to the audience, we're going to have some other forthcoming shows. Next week, we're going to have Lavelle Wells talk about his
Oh
experience
God.
of dealing with being a Native American and our Afro American and Native American. We're going to have different people. We have a whole list of people we're going to have, hopefully weekly, where we can invite people on to tell their stories. Again, we may disagree with them and we may challenge them, but at the end of the day, they need a voice to articulate where they need to do. So we'd like you to continue to join us, suggest other guests we'd like to host, and as Tim throughout the gauntlet, throughout the task to us that, hey, there might be some opportunities for us to expand our scope to help bring more news to the African American community throughout the state. So we would like to take him up on that. But on that note, we'd like to thank you for being with us today. As we always end our show, may the force be with you. Baroko.